Oceans tremendous, forever to last. Our days before us, each a vital part. Pieces of a puzzle, a work of art. Perseverance, innovation is their tale. A picture of triumph beyond the veil. Diversity, strength, stories of grace, passing the torch. We light our space, transformative impact. Women stand strong, creating a world where we all belong. A torch that's passed and a flame that's strong, from those who've paved the way, now are gone. To those who follow the colors that blend, excellence, hard work, a legacy to send. Determination's
We have Keandre Thompson here. His focus is in human resources as well. He has heavily recruiting across different industries. And then we have Michelle Davis, who is the U.S. military. So she is going to also be able to elaborate better on some of those types of positions. Our goal here today is to have more of a summit style communication, where we will ask some questions here, we'll talk about them, and we encourage your participation. No question is a dumb question, so we really want to deep dive into some of the topics. So a lot of you were in the one just right before this, the seminar right before this, and you guys asked a lot of great questions, but there is a little bit more deep diving that we want to be able to go into where we can detail some of that information for you. So we'll start with some housekeeping, and then we'll go into the presentation. So with that being said, we want to talk about the colon AI. You want to make sure that you are networking with the friends that you have met here. Keep that going. Be sure to scan your badge in and out so that you are getting those CEU and PDH credits for coming to this seminar. We have the conference survey. Please make sure that you log on and you complete the survey. And then for the slides that we have, everything that you've gone to, the presentation slides will be available for you at www.slideshare.net. And we have our panelists here that you can find their information in the books and online, where you can also contact us. And I think that's it. We'll get started. So we have Keandre here. He'll start the presentation.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say thank you so much for attending this presentation today. You could have been anywhere else, but I do strongly value your time, and you giving it to me is very appreciated. So by a show of hands, how many people today here are looking for a job? Just raise your hand. Okay, how many people here actually enjoy job interviews? Do you find those enjoyable? Not a lot of people find job interviews enjoyable, which is understandable. Putting yourself out there can be very uncomfortable, but what I will say is that is the differentiator in you and your competitor in regards to gaining employment. So the name of the presentation today, let's get that job search skills and strategies, techniques for successfully acquiring an interview. So some goals and learning objectives for today. We're going to discuss techniques for acquiring a job interview, share some strategies for identifying the right job in the field that you're looking to go into, provide actionable tips for resume, cover letter, and interview prep. In addition to that, learn to leverage social networks such as Facebook and LinkedIn for you to gain employment as well. So how do you go about finding the right job? So I want you to start by asking yourself these questions. What skills do I have or currently enjoy using? What industries have I worked in or industries do I want to go to work in? how do my current strengths align with the job market? So if any of us follow the current news, as far as employment, you know there's a need for project managers in construction, during COVID, nurses, anyone in the healthcare field, you name it. So just think about how your current skill set, or maybe if you're in software, you do graphic design. Does that align with the current needs of the market? Are you looking to target private businesses, public firms? It's all up to you and what your interest is. Setting SMART goals for job hunting. So the SMART acronym can be broken down into specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So here I'll read the example. So let's say for the sake of an argument, let's take someone, I am a recent high school graduate that lives in Michigan with little employment experience. So this is geared towards someone in that early career talent stage, and they're applying to hourly jobs in the fast food sector. They're looking for jobs maybe within a 3 to 10 mile radius of their home, and their plan is to call at least one employer a day for the next 30 days, or maybe that's online or going in person to apply, and they'll track all of this via an Excel spreadsheet. Now, why I like that this SMART goal is defined, because for one, they're very specific. They say, hey, I don't have a strong skill set right now, or I have the ability to work, but I'm gonna target the fast food sector. I may not have a vehicle, so I'm gonna target somewhere within walking distance or somewhere drivable or that I can Uber that wouldn't cost me a lot of money. Achievable, it's very doable to call at least one employer a day or follow up with an email, connection on social media. And time bound, right? So 30 days, that's a very safe goal to start when you're looking for employment. Creating a job search action plan. So as we just discussed, we talked about 30 days. Depending upon your tenure, a job search could take anywhere from 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, depending on the type of fit that you're looking for and where you are in your career. So week one, you can spend that going back to the example that we just talked about with the high schooler. Maybe that first week is doing the self-assessment, Myers-Briggs testing, looking up restaurant jobs, whether that be a cashier or crew worker. Week two, the resume and cover letter drafting. Coming up, and this now can be done with ChatGPT. If you're not familiar with it, you could actually put your resume into ChatGPT, which is an AI tool, the paid version, and say, hey, ChatGPT, can you break my resume down or make it more concise in these areas to highlight my skill set? So you have the ability to do that now. And here I have Michigan Works. For those out-of-towners, think of your local unemployment office. You could actually go there and utilize this service for free as well. Or you could look for paid professionals on platforms such as Upwork, Fiverr, or find individuals in local Facebook groups or on LinkedIn to do this for you. So going to week four, cold calling. Not a lot of people pick up the phone these days. We're all getting bot calls, but maybe texting or still calling anyway. Emailing is big now, whether that's a LinkedIn email, or there's even software now to where if you're targeting a big company or a smaller company, you can find that email address and it'll get to the person you're looking for directly. In addition to that, I have here YAF, you always follow up. That is where the magic happens. When you're following up, you are beating your competition because they're not following up. Please do not apply to a job one time and think that that was enough. When you want that job, you have to be not only consistent, but persistent. Crafting a winning resume and cover letter. So winning resume and cover letter should include the following. So that resume needs to highlight your skills and accomplishments. Even if it's not relevant to the job, I would say highlight your accomplishments just to show that you're active in your social world outside of employment. Tailoring the resume to the job description, I'm going to talk about that multiple times, and when we get into our panel discussion, that is very key. Your personal experience from your previous job needs to align to that job description and almost mimic the job qualifications for you to be considered for the job. That's what's going to get you the interview. Keep it concise and to the point. Your resume should really, generally, if you don't have a lot of experience, 1 page, but no more than 3 pages max. If you have a long tenured career, as a recruiter and a person that looks at resumes daily, I don't need to see 5, 10 pages. At that point, you lost me. So this is a fun fact, and you can write this down as well. A recruiter is looking at your resume at most between 5 seconds and a minute max. So that means that resume needs to vary in 5 seconds or less, Basically tell me that you're qualified for the job or not. Otherwise, it's going to get rejected and not even seen by the hiring manager. So the cover letter. So a lot of people have mixed views on cover letters, but I'm a strong proponent of the cover letter. You're, again, trying to summarize your life or work experience in 1 to 3 pages. The cover letter definitely gives you an ample opportunity to showcase your skill set beyond that and why you want the role, some of your accomplishments. You can go into depth in that. And so here, if you don't have the recruiter's name, which can be found on social media platforms like LinkedIn, you can utilize to whom it may concern. That is a very good way to address your cover letter if you don't know the hiring manager or recruiter or talent acquisition partner's name. And align your skills with the company needs. If they need a graphic designer, that cover letter should talk about, I've been a graphic designer for 3 to 5 years, or in my spare time, I use Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator, really upskilling and selling yourself for that employment opportunity. Using social networking to find a job. So number one, everyone in the room and online. LinkedIn is right now, I'd say, the number one social platform in regards to employment. I'm actually surprised about how many people in the world still don't have LinkedIn, but it's understandable. Almost over 1 billion people on the platform. If you're looking to network, you're looking to gain employment, if you're looking to showcase yourself as a thought leader, LinkedIn is the platform for that. Secondary, I would say Indeed gets slept on, but if you're in the IT realm or engineering, Dice or GitHub are also viable platforms, but LinkedIn is definitely the number one go-to site. And also note, you can also blog, or LinkedIn gives you the ability to create articles, or maybe you want to create your own website, going back to showcasing yourself as a thought leader. But again, keeping it concise and to the point, engaging with potential employers. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more in our panel summit, especially on LinkedIn. If you follow a hiring manager or you follow a recruiter and they posted an article or a life update in regards to their employment, you want to be commenting on that to show that you are engaged. Even if there's not an opportunity for you now, there may be one in the future. And again, you're growing your brand and you're growing your platform, you're solidifying yourself as an expert. And following companies of interest. So again, this could align with your 30-day plan. Who do you want to work for? And so that's a question you really have to ask yourself. So in the Midwest, I say in Michigan, we're in the automotive sector. So do you want to work for GM? Do you want to work for Ford? I know Google has a headquarters in Ann Arbor. Stellantis, like you have to really be specific about who you're targeting and why. And that'll all transcend back to your 30-day plan. Networking strategies. So if you're attending this conference, this was definitely, for lack of a better word, a major play. This was a good networking strategy to grow your brand and career. Strategies to effectively build your network, identifying key contacts as well as decision makers. So in the last session, I actually sat in, the speaker that spoke previously was talking about there's going to be a lip bar event on Friday and that you should attend that. And those are the type of sessions that you want to go to. You want to catch, sometimes with these type of events, you want to catch people kind of off guard, where they're kind of chill, where they're getting to know you in a more ample setting. And that way, that's where you build, that's where the relationship happens. So places like that, how in the previous session they were talking about the golf course, is happening off site, to where, yes, other people applied, but I got to know, for example, Tanya at the WOC STEM Summit. I like her personality, et cetera. She may not have all the skills, but I'm going to give her an opportunity because I met her at that summit and I enjoyed the conversation with her. So sometimes going outside your comfort zone, if we got some introverts in the room, not everyone may be an extrovert. That's the decision maker, and that will sometimes put you ahead of your competition. Being authentic, right? So maybe you don't have a lot of experience. You want to just be very honest and transparent with where you are in your career. That should showcase in the resume, and that should showcase when I talk to you. So for example, hi, I'm Jane Doe. I'm currently in school. I may have 1 to 2 years of experience. I saw the opportunity that presented itself, and I want to work for your company for XYZ reasons. Can we have a follow-up discussion, interview, et cetera? And attending industry events. Again, I talked about this. Career fairs are also good. Career fairs virtually, I would say now, not as much, but due to COVID, they were bigger during COVID. But still, even if you're online, going to virtual career fairs or in person is always a game changer, because again, you want to make yourself memorable or make a lasting impression. And then that way, when you're in person, you always can put a name to a face. Like, oh, I met such and such at the conference. Yes, yes. How can I help you? Always good. Securing the interview, key strategies. You will secure a job interview if you are able to do the following. Researching the company thoroughly before applying. So if you're looking to go after a publicly traded company, so let's say GM, for example, you could go to their website, you could pull up their most recent shareholder press release, recent updates that are going on with the company, and that should translate into your cover letter potentially as well, or even an interview. Like, hey, I saw such and such is going on with the company recently. What do you think about that? Or what's your experience been working here? Or I know you've been, or even if you're going on LinkedIn and looking at a hiring manager's profile, I've seen you've been at GM for maybe 12 years. What has your experience been like to make you want to stay with the company that long? And then now it's like now the hiring manager or recruiter is flattered because, oh my gosh, you took the time to not only look at my profile, but do your research on me as well, which once again puts you in the spotlight and differentiating yourself from the competition. Using keywords from the job description in your resume. That is key. If your resume does not have keywords from the job description, it's more than likely that it's not even going to make it to the hiring manager. Following up after submitting applications. So I had this in a previous slide, but I don't care if it's following up one day after, a week later, 30 days later, you always follow up because, again, that is the differentiator. And even if you don't get selected, it's always good to follow up as to why. What can I improve on? And not every job is for you, so keep that in mind as well. So today we learned, just to give you an overview before we get into our panel, what we discussed, how to get the job successfully and acquire an interview. We must set SMART goals, so we talked about those when we're on the job hunt. Create a 30-day job search. This could be longer depending on your tenure. Developing a winning resume and cover letter. Having a strong LinkedIn profile. We're going to talk about that as well just here in a moment. Having a positive attitude, because as we all started this off previously, not a lot of us are really crazy about doing job interviews, but we're going to be positive and put our best foot forward. We're going to put ourselves out there and we're going to get that job. We're going to hit those goals. And researching companies preemptively, we talked about that in the previous slide. Doing your homework, that's what this is about. And that's going to be, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the differentiator between you and your competition is that you did your homework. You were vested and you cared, and you incorporated that into your resume and the cover letter and your interview prep as well. So congratulations, you are now one step closer to your job goals. Let's connect. So my information is here as well. I'll also be here after we're done with our presentation if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up with me as well.
Okay, thank you, Keandre. Now we want to start the summit. So again, I encourage you all to come to the microphone and ask your questions. We are online, so that way we can make sure that our online participants can hear what your questions are. And we are going to start with deep diving into some of the topics that were mentioned, even some of the topics that were mentioned in the presentation earlier. So I like to start with how many of you have actually participated and had an internship for the position that you're interested in? Okay, so internships are very important, especially in roles like STEM. So I want to start with the panel and ask, what do you feel internships provide for a candidate, and why should they do them?
Okay, so I will start. So with internships in the STEM field, they are very relevant, and oftentimes, I'd say a very versed hiring manager. In the earlier presentation, I heard someone say that you shouldn't put your GPA on the resume. I would disagree with that. I think it depends on the hiring manager. You actually should put your GPA on the resume, because even in the job description, sometimes it'll say a minimum of 3.0 or higher. Oftentimes, depending on the stringent requirements of the hiring manager, they're looking for somebody with that 3.5, 3.9 that has potentially done an internship. You're a member of an organization affiliated with your major. So maybe you're in a group for electrical engineers, software engineers, mechanical engineers, but not only are you a member, but you're engaged in a leadership position as well. And so the more involved you are, like I said, your extracurriculars, your highlights, achievements, maybe you've done prestigious things with this organization, I can say in this day and age, you definitely want to do an internship versus not doing one as it pertains to STEM.
Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Davis, and just to add a little clarification, I'm actually not in the military, but I do work in the federal space with the Department of Defense. I'm actually a Department of the Army employee. I am also in the recruitment, retention, and development space for federal civilians. And so with that, I want to add multiple components for why you should participate in internships. One of which is because it gives you experience that you may not necessarily get otherwise. So whether you're in college, high school, and I share that because even if you guys aren't, you can share that information. But you typically come to the table with a lot less experience than somebody who's been in the workforce for, any number of years. And so take that internship, but take that internship with your end goal in mind. What is it that you want to get out of it? That should be aligned with where you ultimately want to go. So for example, if you want to end up in, let's say, an HR space, if you take an internship, typically the internship is written in such a way that it aligns with the organization's priorities, so the work that they want to get out of you. But how do you then turn that into what it is that you ultimately want, in the long term for a career? So I think that the internships work because you are able to try out the test run, is what we call it. You test run the organization as well. So it's the experience first, and then you get an inside look at the organization. Is that an organization that aligns with your values? Is that an organization that aligns with your lifestyle? Is that an organization that aligns with your professional desires? So, and then obviously for the organization, that's an opportunity for them to see if you align with all of those things. And so it's the best way to get an up-close and personal look at whether or not this is going to align with your future goals, your professional and personal interests, and with the organization. Are they who they say they are? Is the environment conducive to, your well-being? I would say mental health, but well-being. All of those things are really, really important. And again, it also then gets you the experience that you may not necessarily have, going through college, and it gives you an advantage when they start talking experience. And on the federal side, we have to qualify you, so it's a lot less flexible on the federal side. So we have to see experience in order to do that. So it also impacts where we're able to bring you in at in terms of salary.
So I will elaborate on the internships in regards to the corporate environment. And also specifically maybe automotive or manufacturing, where a lot of STEM is there. So today, a lot of STEM is in robotics and automation, and even in manufacturing engineering. There's specialized IT for manufacturing or for the automotive industry. And so internships, of course, are for the early career person who's coming in, and as Michelle spoke, all of those things are in place. And typically, a mentor is provided. So there's not just networking opportunity, but that mentorship to develop, and you're making those connections, and you're learning from them. That's where you get to make mistakes, and you get to learn, and you get to ask those questions that you don't have to be ashamed of. But for those who are in their career already, internships are not what they're looking for, right? But there's also apprenticeships. So sometimes you're changing your career, you would want to develop more into a career. In that automotive space, apprenticeships are also often offered, and they're offered where you are getting paid and you get that hands-on experience, you get that additional education that is applied. So it's learning and application, which is what you need to do when you're in that mid-career space. So we think that internships are very important when you are trying to build your career, you're trying to build your network, and you want that mentorship. Is there any questions in regards to internships? Yes, please speak in the mic so that our online participants can hear.
Do y'all have any tips for like transitioning like from an internship and making that like a full-time position?
So tips, I would say when you take on an internship, that is your time to show out. That's your time to ask questions, learn, and do the absolute best that you can. This is where that SMART goal comes into place. Make your intentions known and be very specific about what direction that you want to go in. Or if you're not specific, that's that time to have that conversation with your mentor to say, this, I can take this avenue or I can take this avenue. And I think that these are my strengths. I would like to learn more here, or I would like to learn more there. And that's where you would get that opportunity to be exposed to those different areas of your specialized expertise. You guys have any feedback with that?
Go ahead.
To add on to that, I would say I would position myself to have a plan B as well, because internships can often be 2 to 3 months, sometimes 6 months, depending upon the hiring manager or the need of the individual. So while I actually had gained an internship, I'd be looking at other internship opportunities as well that potentially segue elsewhere. And I'd also be not necessarily holding, but having the hiring manager held accountable to a degree, maybe doing like 30-day checkpoints as you're probably getting towards the end of the internship, just to get a base of where you are, because they may not have a need now, but they may need you in the future. But if I had an internship, the basis of what I'm saying is I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket. You never do that, especially because this is your career. You have to know where you're trying to go.
Absolutely. And I'll just add, too, that when we go into the internships, on the federal side, the way that our internships are structured with Department of the Army is that we hire you with the intention of ultimately non-competitively converting you into our longer-term programs, or you becoming Department of the Army civilians. But I am aware that other organizations have different types of programs where it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have permanent employment. And so with that, my recommendation is going into an internship with that type of organization, you want to be very clear up front. You want to let them know what your intentions are. If you see them being your employer of choice, have that initial conversation with the employer and ask them what's in the realm of possible long term here. Let them know that you are very interested in working for them and why. And then why, if that internship is not structured for permanent employment, ask them how you go about becoming considered or being considered for ultimate permanent employment. Have that conversation up front. I always say begin with the end in mind. Make sure that, that conversation is aligning with where you ultimately want to go. Because with a lot of those types of internships where they're not structured for follow-on permanent employment, the hiring manager would have no idea if you don't have that conversation up front. They would have no idea that you're ultimately interested in permanent employment otherwise. Because as an employer, as someone who hires people, we know that all of the employers are in a war for talent. So if you're not having that conversation with us, then we think that, you guys are just there to get the experience for the 30, 60, 90 days, however long that opportunity is for, and then you're moving on. So don't be shy to have that real conversation. This is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. And in addition to that, I also want to say that sometimes we all are hired based on what the organization's needs are. Don't be afraid to let them know what else you bring to the table. You may have started out with a degree focus in one thing, and I've hired so many people like this, but ultimately you want to do something else. You started out in IT, but then you find just through, changes in whatever, whether it's personal or professional, that you have more of a passion for something else. Ask them if there's an opportunity for you to showcase that passion, because who knows, they might even look at it and say, wow, we weren't thinking that we were going to hire somebody for this other position, but a byproduct of this internship is that I found this amazing person with this other skill set that I need somebody permanently for. So everything is on the table at that point. Just don't be afraid to have that initial conversation.
I want to piggyback off of that, considering that this is women in STEM. And so most of the time we're in male-dominant environments, right? So what she just spoke about in regards to making sure that you're bringing those special skills to the table. You bring a fresh perspective, and know that as a woman, you bring that to the table and bring your confidence, because you will be challenged. This is a summit forum. You will be challenged in that environment. So your skill set, you need to be confident about, know that you know what you're doing, and that you bring a fresh perspective. Make yourself special to stand out in that environment as a woman in STEM. Okay. We are successful in those roles, but you will need to probably be in a panel of men sometimes. If that your interview may be a panel of all men, and they'll say, what makes you better, right? And so you need to make sure that you have that confidence in line. You take those opportunities, like the internships that we said, so that you're building your resume. You make it known and be specific about what it is that you're interested in, and then you go for it. So in today's world, social media has a very large presence. Why is social media important today? And what are the do's and don'ts of social media professionally?
Wonderful. So earlier in the presentation, I talked about LinkedIn, which is a social platform. How you engage on, let's say, a platform such as LinkedIn is vastly different than how you would engage on a platform such as Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. With the LinkedIn profile, what's going to make you stand out and have that #1 profile? We heard it in earlier presentations today, recommendations, testimonials to people that have worked with you or have seen your skill set in action. You can actually reach out to them and say, hey, would you mind making a recommendation on my LinkedIn? Outlining your skills on LinkedIn is going to be a game changer as well. So I'll use the graphic designer example again. If you have experience with Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop, putting those skills into your LinkedIn profile is a game changer. That will be very helpful for you. So some of the do's is utilizing LinkedIn to build your credibility and utilizing the platform appropriately. An example of a don't would be you would not want to be on your LinkedIn profile talking about how, you know, your ex-brother-in-law owes you $100 and hasn't paid you back yet. That's a big no-no, because then you're diminishing your credibility. So when you think I'll speak from a corporate standpoint, and I'll use the automotive sector again. These people are trying to hand you the keys to the kingdom. I'm giving you potentially discount codes. You're dealing with competitor company information. I need to know that I can trust you with this privilege. But if I see on social media you don't carry yourself effectively or in a professional manner, that could lead me to not want to employ you.
And I'll add, for me, it's about representation and presentation. You know, whether you're on your professional platform or a personal platform, we Google you. We look for you. We look for you on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and whatever any of the others are. So presentation and representation. When I hire anyone, I want to make sure that you always present yourself well. And because if I send you out to represent the Army or our mission, then what are you going to look like? What are you going to sound like? What are your conversations look and sound like? And the same thing professionally. What is your conversation about? And so I know in a lot of these forums, we're going to talk about what you all bring to the table in terms of your academic achievements, any projects that you've worked. But please, 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 if you don't take anything else away from this, take away that what you do personally, how you represent and present, are just as important. Because, you know, most of us in the positions that we're in, we worked really hard to get here. So who we hire is going to make or break our mission. It's going to make and break, you know, who we are and how we represent and the credibility that we work so hard to build. And those are things, too, that I think is what sets you apart from even the competition. Yep. You know, if you look great on paper, you interview well, and everything else that I see about you is not quite what I'm looking for, then that's going to make me look at the next person. So I get it. We've gone out. We had a great weekend, but how are you going to present that? What are you wearing? What are you talking about? What are you holding in your hand? I actually had a panel that did not hire somebody because every picture that we saw on social media had a picture of him holding, in a club situation, holding, different types of beverages or celebrating activities that did not necessarily represent our Army values. Though, and I get it, it's your personal time. But that could be the determining factor on whether or not you get a job or an additional interview. So please keep that in mind.
I will add that my experience also has been that we have declined offers to candidates due to the fact that we have Googled them. So please be aware that we definitely do look at more than just what you provide to us. On your LinkedIn, we will look at other social media platforms. We have seen some very interesting things out there, and that's your character. That's your integrity. Integrity is, what are you doing when no one's looking? So what are you doing when you're not presenting yourself for a career, your personal life? So how can we trust you? And then you're also representing our organization when you're out, or you're saying you're an employee of this or that. And so that is something that is very relevant today, social media. You have to be aware now that you're not in college, or now that you're out here and you want to expound on your career. You want to make sure that you are presenting yourself and you're imaging yourself in a way that anyone can see, that needs to be you all the time.
We had a question too.
Any questions in regards to social media? Yes.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Or good afternoon, sorry.
Yeah, afternoon, right.
Yes. And so I just had a question pertaining to working within the Department of Defense and you being in a highly competitive position. What do you think are some things that helped you be able to get that position? What do you think are some things that helped you stand out?
So obviously your experience and what you're bringing to the table, that's typically, if we're only looking at you on paper, that's typically what we have to go by, right? But we talked career fairs earlier. If you are attending an event where you're able to be considered in person, then it's not only what you've done in the past, those things that would be on paper. But again, it goes back to representation and presentation. How are you presenting? What makes you different from anybody else that I would be willing to consider? And, I won't bore you guys with going back through that list again, but I think you should keep those things in mind. Those soft skills are very, very, very important. So how will you highlight that? And when you do have the opportunity to engage with somebody who is a decision maker on a position you're interested in, you've typically got about 1 minute. 1 minute. If you get longer, they're really interested. But you've got about 1 minute to highlight those other skills that you bring to the table. I also like to encourage you all to be multifunctional. So again, I might be hiring you for one thing or considering you for one thing, but know in advance how you're going to articulate those other things that could be valuable to any other organization. So then, as we're in that war for talent, we all have reduced resources. You're highlighting to me that if I were to hire you, I'm getting this multifunctional, multifaceted individual that, to me, makes you stand out above the rest. And oh, by the way, how likable are you? Because we all have to show up, whether it's in a virtual space or in person, and work with you. I don't want that employee that can't be told, how to pivot. I don't want that employee. I also don't want that employee who's going to be in that space causing, drama with the team that I already have. So for me, I would much rather hire that person who's likable and train them outside of obviously having requirements for certifications or anything else. But the likability of you is more important to me than what you're coming to the table with, having experienced or created in a workspace.
Well said.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
That was good.
Any more questions? Come on.
Okay, so do you prefer to go by Dre?
Yes.
Okay, so Dre, you had mentioned that, LinkedIn is very important to present yourself. And on this summit, as well as the previous one, they kept highlighting how your resume should be tailored to whatever it is that you're applying for. But on LinkedIn, should we just list all the skills that we have, or should we also tailor that to what it is that we're looking for specifically?
I would say all the skills on LinkedIn, and I'd say even for early career talent, I know that I do early career talent as well. So Handshake is a big platform. So your Handshake in the beginning will mirror the LinkedIn profile just to kind of give you a base and a start. And again, so if you've got that Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop or just all your skills in general, you're going to have multiple resumes in the beginning as well. So your LinkedIn should be like your general resume. And I like the LinkedIn the best as well because you're given a full circle of view versus just that 1 and 3 pages of the resume. You've got the bio section, you've got the recommendations, you've got the skills. And what I like too as well, so let's say this is for the experienced talent as well, you may not have to put open to work on your profile. I've ran across profiles sometimes to where the person has put their email address as well as their phone number in the bio. So that, as a recruiter or hiring manager, gives me the indication, okay, this person didn't put open to work on their profile, but they may be interested in opportunities and I could follow up with them because they listed that information. So definitely list all the skills, and again, you're gonna have multiple resumes. You should have a base resume and a base cover letter that you can edit to the multiple employers that you're going to be going after, because you want to make them feel special and make them feel like their opportunity is for you for multiple reasons.
Any more questions? We've got two.
Good afternoon, Erica Sproul. So my question is, how much grace do you actually give for someone when it comes to their social media? I'm 29 now. I was 22 once upon a time, and I was a little crazy, not too much. But I definitely love to go to a party. You might see me with a drink in my hand. You might have seen say something a little jokingly, but a little crazy on social media. But how much grace do we actually give someone? Is it a certain time frame or what?
I would say this, what it comes down to is your judgment. So why should we give grace if you don't know to take it down? Because this is you imaging yourself and you're presenting yourself. So everything does not belong on social media or needs to be recorded. So sometimes you may need to go back and wash that. You need to clean that and take it down. So it also depends on what it is. So if you're falling out drunk and you're belligerent and you're dancing, in a belligerent way, then that may be questionable behavior, right? And have you outgrown that because you still have it there? So once you change and you start to develop in a way that says, this is where I want to go, I'm an adult now, then you have to be responsible. So this is about your social responsibility as well. And so that's why we're here and we're talking about that, because those things are important. And that's even, I'm in the one on Saturday about generational gaps in communication, and that's actually a big part of interviewing and applying for roles and how do you fit in the workplace today. There is a little give on our side in the workplace to say we need to understand the younger generation that is coming in, but there's also that adaptability that has to happen on your end to say, okay, I take life serious now and I'm ready for this level. So you have to know that that's out there. Make sure that you're preparing yourself for that next stage in your life and that it's not anything that's too wild out there to say, oh, I was 22, but now you're 29, right? So what do you want now? What do you want today?
And to add on to that, I would summarize it in one sentence. Everything is not for the internet. And my mom once told me so many years ago, which is relevant today, it's easy to post things online, but it's hard to take them off because once it's out there, it's out there.
It lives
So if you
forever.
don't want it out there, take it down.
And I do want to add to that. So I get it. We're all human. And I think that there is a certain amount of grace that's extended based on the individual. And that's really just the reality of it. I was 22 once. Thank God we didn't have social media back then. And so I don't think there's anything out there. But so I get it. I can give two different perspectives just based on various scenarios. One of which is I've seen times where I really liked a person. I wanted to hire them. And keep in mind, this is through in-person engagement. And so I then will go back to them and say, hey, we're getting ready to Google you. Make sure that anything that you have out there that you don't want to be considered when we're thinking about hiring you, make sure you lock that down. So, you have, and I'm old, so I can just go back to Facebook, but there are restrictions that you can go back and put on pictures and videos so that only you see it. My bottom line is go back and clean it up. If you don't want to do that, close your page.
Yep.
Close your page. Make sure you do an assessment of who you have on your page, because the people who are your friends at 22 may not necessarily be your friends at 29. And so you just never know what's out there. Make sure you set your parameters so that people can't tag you in anything that you don't want to have out there, because then you don't control that. So my recommendation overall is go back and clean your page up. Go back and lock your page, go back and assess who's on your page, so that anything that you don't want out there to be considered for your employment is not added to your portfolio of consideration. That's my best recommendation. Otherwise, me personally, if I like you like that and I want to hire you, I'm going to show you enough grace to call you and say, do all of those things I just listed. If I don't know you like that, I'm going to say, you know what? I don't think I want to take a chance on this person. But either way, you never know. You know who you're looking for in terms of employment. You never know who's looking for you. And so, again, prepare with that end goal in mind. Go back and clean it up now. This is for everybody. Lock down the page, assess who's on your page, because if you're on that platform, LinkedIn, and people are looking to hire you, I promise you, before they contact you, they've already Googled you. So you want to make sure you're prepared for that first conversation by doing all of those things that we all just listed.
Thank you.
And I'll say, guys, that's where the networking comes in, where you have that network and that mentorship to give you that insight so that you're prepared and you have that likability factor where someone will tell you, do this. So that was a very, very good question.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shonda Witherspoon. I'm a software engineer. And that's kind of where my question goes. So as engineers, we have to take multiple interviews. We have design interviews. We have that, technical interview. And sometimes we have panel interviews. From y'all's experience, which one would you say kind of weighs more? Because there's some times where maybe you do good at technical but not design, or vice versa, or the panel interview is the one that kind of you need more prep on. But from your experience, which ones may be the ones that carry more weight, and how can we prepare for such different types of interviews that are thrown at us?
So, go ahead. I was just going to say, so I've hired people from panel interviews. I've hired people from one-on-ones. It really just depends on that hiring manager. And so I say, do your homework ahead of time. If somebody's reaching out to you for an interview, do your homework on that person. And then when you have the opportunity to talk to them about about the interview, ask them, how is the interview going to be conducted? Is it in person? Is it virtual? Is it going to be a one-on-one? Is it going to be a panel? And if so, you can absolutely ask who the panel members are. Google them all, so that way you're more comfortable with who you're coming to the table to talk about, your experience with. And I think that actually prepares you to be more confident walking into that space, just because you're familiar with who you're walking into that space with. But everything really just depends on who that hiring manager is. So if you're that person, like you said, that might be stronger in one area and not in another, make sure you're bringing that likability factor, because, something that's really going to set you apart from the rest. Because some people are willing to overlook that. It just depends on, who they are, what they're looking for, who they already have on their team. You can ask those kinds of questions as well. So then you're able to augment the support that you would be bringing in terms of value to that team. And you can highlight that piece in the interview.
I also think it strongly depends on specifically what they're looking for, especially as a software engineer. I would say that your technical skill will always be tested. So you will always need to be ready as a software engineer to go through a technical interview. And so we can't say one is more important than the other, but I will say your technical interview is important based on what they're looking for. So if they're looking for an entry-level person, or they're saying 2-3 years of experience, or whatever that experience level is, that's going to pretty much determine probably what that skill level is. Because in a technical environment, it's important. They're saying, I need this person to be able to come in and get on this project, and they need to be able to hit the ground at this level. Those are the type of things that you may need to understand about the role, being a software engineer. But just always be prepared for that technical interview, because that is going to matter depending on the environment, like she said, the hiring manager and what they're looking for, if they're willing to train in certain areas, or if you need this particular technology, if you have to have, this particular skill set to even apply.
And to add to that, I would say the recruiter would tell you that in the initial phone screen as well. So what I would do from a candidate perspective, I'd be looking to build a relationship with that recruiter that's doing the phone screen, because 9 times out of 10, they've had a debrief call with the hiring manager in regards to what they're looking for. And so you should piece that recruiter for information. I would try to keep them on the phone for at least 15, 20, 30 minutes if allowable, and get all the information that you can. So come to that phone screen prepared, having done research on that recruiter, not just the hiring manager, to see what it is they're looking for and how you're basically selling yourself, how you're selling yourself for that. So it's not just one. And sometimes even with the panel and the technical interviews, with corporate, some of these roles can take maybe a month for you to even start, or 2 months, or sometimes it could take the panel. That's why I say you should always not just, the word I'm looking for is, don't put all your eggs in one basket with one company. You should apply to multiple companies because of situations just like that.
Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm going to piggyback to internships. So I've recently been appointed to being over our summer interns, in which I'll be over anywhere from 8 to 12 students, juniors and seniors. So some of the things that we do in-house is have in-house training, and some topics that we touched on is resume building, interview skills, and presentation masters, where they go through a course of different topics. I give it to them, they present it to me, and we critique those skills, and then they present in front of a panel of directors, and they give them feedback. Is there any other things that you guys recommend I can touch with them while they're with us for their internship?
I would. One thing I wanted to talk about today, this is more so for the experienced talent, is pay transparency. And this is for early career talent as well. So I would say oftentimes now, some companies, they're required by the law to disclose a pay range. And that pay range, sometimes the actual salary depends on the hiring manager's budget. And that could be at the lower end of the range or the higher end of the range. So if you see a position, let's say a software development position has a range of $80,000 to $150K. And you see that, and you're like, oh, I feel like I meet the criteria going for the $150K. Oftentimes, sometimes when people do that, you're pricing yourself out. So I would say don't discount the value that you bring, but have a solid number based upon your living circumstances and what you're looking for that you want to get out of that position. And sometimes that position might not be for you. Every opportunity may not be for you, so you have to apply. I would say this is a numbers game. In the presentation, I talked about applying to one job a day. For the experienced person, that may be 10, that may be 20. So you really have to put yourself out there. I would say definitely include something in regards to pay transparency and how to value yourself.
Okay.
I would add to include career development and diversity in the career, because if they're in an internship, then they're at the entry level. And a lot of times, the entry level role can have a fork. So you can take your career this way, or you can take your career this way, and these are the developmental steps for that. So I would say maybe go over that, as well as the pay and where that ends up, ultimately based on, because this is a decision-making time for them. When you go on into the internships, you're still new, right? You're still fresh, and you're trying to figure out exactly what you want. And you may have thought you wanted one thing, but now that you know what that is really about, do I want that or do I want this? So I think, letting them know that your career may have 2 different avenues, right? And this is how you can get to those. And that really helps with preparation going forward.
Oh, the last thing too, I'm sorry, Michelle, but a pet peeve is when people put their address on the resume. You do not need to do that anymore.
I'll tell them that.
First, I want to say I think that's an awesome way that you've put it together to continue to develop the interns. I think it's great for them to go out and meet with other senior leaders to understand their expectations. What I would do in coming back is to have frequent touch points to ask them, what did you get out of it, the conversation? I would also, if I were you, have touch points with those people that you have the meeting with, so you understand what they were told, you understand any assessments that they've taken away about the people, so that you could then leverage that to help continue growing them on your end. But again, have that touch point with your interns to ask them what they took out. And then I think trying to understand the delta between what message was delivered, what are you going to do with that? And so I think to really